The rain was light that morning, falling like a whisper over the rooftops of Windsor Castle. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that felt full of secrets. Inside the thick stone walls, the castle was quiet. No footsteps echoed through the halls. Only the sound of the rain tapping on the windows and the slow tick of the old clock in the hallway about Sarah Mitchel. The royal archivist moved carefully through Prince Philip's private study. She had been working for the royal family for over 25 years, but never had she been asked to enter this room. It had been kept closed since Prince Philip's death 3 years ago. No one had touched anything. The late Duke of Edinburgh had always kept this space to himself. Now, the family had finally given permission to clean and sort his belongings. Sarah's hands moved slowly over old photographs, medals, and thick books that smelled of time. She was careful not to disturb the dust that settled like memory on everything. As she opened a small drawer, hidden under a stack of naval maps, her fingers touched something different, a leather folder, smooth and heavier than the others. She pulled it out and paused. The leather was dark brown and stitched neatly. On the front was a golden seal and Prince Philip's name, written in bold, clear letters. She opened it slowly, heart beating faster. Inside was a document. It was a will, but not the one already. Read after his death. This one was private, hidden, dated just 6 months before he died. Sarah froze. Her eyes moved across the page. Prince Philip's signature was there. So was the seal of his private solicitor. She sat down on the edge of a chair, breath catching in her throat. The document said this will should only be revealed when the time was right, for the good of the monarchy. It gave instructions for how and when it should be shared. It was full of emotion and deep thought. At the bottom was a note written in Prince Philip's own hand. It read, "Let this be found when it is most needed. The future will need clarity, not confusion. This is my final wish, not to divide, but to guide." Sarah's hands shook. She knew she had to report it right away, but something made her stop and read it again. It wasn't just a legal document, it was something more. It felt like a voice from the past, quiet but strong, still guiding. Within hours, the palace's legal team was called. The top advisors were notified. Sir Edward Young, the king's private secretary, was the first to read it. He stood by the window, his face pale, eyes not blinking. "This changes everything," he whispered. The team worked all night. They examined the seal, the signature, and every small detail. They tested the paper, checked every law. By morning, the answer was clear. The will was real. Prince Philip had written a second secret will, and it was valid, but its contents would shake the royal family. While the palace was in quiet panic, Princess Catherine was in London. She was visiting a children's hospital. She wore a soft blue coat and smiled warmly at each child she met. She didn't know that her name was written in bold letters in Prince Philip's private will. She had no idea her life was about to change. Queen Camilla was also busy, reading reports about a royal banquet and choosing which charities to support next. She had become comfortable in her role as queen consort. She believed she was secure in the eyes of the crown, trusted and respected. But behind the palace doors, the foundation beneath her was starting to crack. That night, a private meeting was called at Buckingham Palace. The thick red curtains were drawn. Only the closest royal advisers were allowed inside. James Harrison, the royal solicitor, stood at the head of the long oak table. The secret will was in his hands. He read it slowly. The room was silent. The first part of the will was a personal message from Prince Philip. He spoke not as a royal, but as a father, a grandfather, and a servant of the nation. He wrote with care, with love, and with sharp honesty. Then came the surprising part. He had named Princess Catherine as the main receiver of several of his most personal treasures, his rare book collection, his naval journals, and even his private study at the Sandringham estate. This room had always been his private world. Now he wanted Catherine to have it. No one else, not even Queen Elizabeth, had touched that space since his death. But the biggest shock was not about what Catherine was given. It was about why Prince Philip wrote that Catherine had something rare. He said she had the ability to carry the past with dignity and walk into the future with grace. He wrote that she had served the royal family without ever asking for more. She had become, in his words, the quiet heart of the monarchy. Queen Camilla's name appeared only briefly. Prince Philip said he respected her efforts, but his hopes for the future lay with Catherine. The words were clear. The message was stronger than any crown or title. When the meeting ended, the silence hung heavy in the air. The question was not what had been written, it was what now. Outside the palace, the rain had stopped. But the storm was only just beginning, to be continued, The secret will had not been shared with the public, but inside the palace, it was now all anyone could talk about. Whispers followed every hallway. Doors closed more quickly. Eyes looked around carefully before speaking. In royal circles, silence often meant more than words. And now, silence was everywhere. Queen Camilla had not yet seen the full will, but she had heard enough. Her private secretary, a kind but nervous woman named Jane, had read the summary in a quiet voice. As the words fell, Camilla sat still in her chair. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry, but her fingers tightened on the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Later that day, she asked for the room to be cleared. She wanted to be alone. She stared out the window at the royal gardens. The flowers were in bloom, but she did not see them. Her mind went back years of struggle, of slowly earning public respect, of trying to find her place. Now it felt like all of that could disappear with one signature. One decision from a man who was no longer alive. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine was still unaware. She had just returned home from the children's hospital and was helping her daughter, Charlotte, prepare for a school performance. She laughed with her, helped her tie her shoes, and gave her a little kiss on the forehead. Her life was quiet, full of small, loving moments. She had no idea her world was about to be turned upside down. That evening, the royal family gathered for a private dinner at Windsor. The king was quiet. He looked older than usual, tired. The news of his father's secret had worn heavily on him. He loved his wife, Camilla. She had stood by him for years. But he also knew the kind of respect his father had carried, and how much his words still mattered. Catherine entered the room gracefully, as she always did. She smiled at the staff, nodded gently to the guards, and walked with calm steps. She took her seat beside Prince William, unaware that every eye in the room was slowly drifting toward her. King Charles cleared his throat. The room fell silent. He looked around and finally rested his eyes on Catherine. "I need to speak to you," he said quietly. Privately. A hush filled the room. Moments later, she followed the king into a smaller side room. The door closed behind them. Catherine looked up at him with calm curiosity. "Is everything all right, Your Majesty?" she asked softly. King did not speak right away. He handed her a sealed envelope. Her name was written on the front, in Prince Philip's strong handwriting. Catherine felt her heart skip. She slowly opened it. The letter inside was long. Prince Philip had written it just months before he passed. It was personal, full of his thoughts and hopes. He praised her kindness, her strength, her ability to listen. He said she reminded him of Queen Elizabeth when she was young, not in blood, but in spirit. He wrote, "You were not born into this world, Catherine, but you walked into it with grace. I saw in you what I once saw in duty itself: silence, strength, and soul. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She didn't notice when the king placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You've been named in his private will," Charles said. Softly, he left you his study at Sandringham, his private writings, and more. He said you are the one he trusts to carry forward the true spirit of the crown. Catherine's hand covered her mouth. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me?" "Because you never asked," the king replied. "And that, my dear, is why he chose you." Back in her private quarters, Catherine sat alone. The letter lay in her lap. She had read it 3 times already. Her heart was full, but it was also confused, heavy. She didn't want to be the center of something that might cause pain. She respected Queen Camilla. She had never seen herself as someone meant to rise above others. She only wanted to serve, to help. But now Prince Philip's voice seemed to whisper from the pages. Sometimes the crown rests best on the quietest. Head, the next morning, news began to leak. Someone inside the palace had spoken. A reporter from a trusted paper called the palace's press office. Then another, then 10 more. They all asked the same question. Is it true Princess Catherine was named above Queen Camilla in Prince Philip's secret will? The palace gave no comment, but the silence only made the fire burn faster. By afternoon, the newspapers were printing bold headlines. Secret will discovered. Catherine chosen over Camilla. Royal shake-up. Outside Buckingham Palace, people gathered. Some supported Camilla. Others praised Catherine. The world was now watching. Camilla stayed in her room. She refused to read the papers, but she heard the voices outside. She heard her own name followed by words like replaced and forgotten. Late that night, she walked alone in the palace garden. She looked up at the stars. She had spent her life trying to stay in the background, to earn her place quietly. And now, quietly, it was being taken from her. In another part of the palace, Catherine sat by her bedroom window, her hand resting on the letter. She didn't want this to turn into a battle, but she also knew she couldn't refuse what Prince Philip had asked of her. She thought of her children. She thought of the future, and she whispered, "If this is my duty, I will carry it with honor." But never with pride. The night was still, but the royal winds had already changed. The storm outside had passed, but the real storm was just beginning inside the palace walls. By the 3rd day after the news of Prince Philip's secret will, the royal household was no longer calm. Every conversation was whispered. Every step was taken with care. The world outside was buzzing. News channels ran endless stories. People across the country and around the world wanted answers. Why had Prince Philip chosen Catherine? And what did that mean for Queen Camilla? In public, the palace stayed silent. But inside, emotions were building. Queen Camilla stayed in her private apartment at Clarence House. She had canceled all her engagements. Her staff said she was unwell, but everyone knew that wasn't the full truth. She had seen the letter. She had read every word. It wasn't just the gifts Prince Philip left to Catherine that hurt. It was the reason behind them. His words had been clear. He believed Catherine was the one to carry the royal family into the future. He called her the quiet strength the monarchy will need. Camilla sat by the fire in silence, staring at the flames. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was heartbroken. After all the years she spent trying to be accepted, trying to stand tall beside Charles, it felt like she was being pushed aside all over again. She looked down at her lap, where she held a single sheet of paper. Prince Philip had written her a letter, too, but it was short. He thanked her for her loyalty. He said he respected her position. But that was all. No warmth, no affection, no hope. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine sat in her own room at Kensington Palace, holding the longer letter close to her heart. It still didn't feel real. She never wanted to compete with anyone. She never wanted to be chosen over someone else. But Prince Philip's wishes were now a matter of history, and they could not be ignored. Prince William entered the room and sat beside her. He had been quiet since the will was revealed. He knew this moment was much bigger than either of them. It wasn't just about personal feelings. It was about the shape of the royal family, the future of the crown. "Do you regret reading it?" he asked gently. Catherine shook her head. "No," she said softly, "but I wish he hadn't made it so public." William looked at her carefully. "He trusted you. That means something." Catherine looked out the window. "I just don't want anyone to think I ever asked for this." "You didn't," William said. "That's exactly why he chose you." The next morning, King Charles called for a private meeting. Only Catherine, Camilla, William, and a few top advisors were invited. The room was cold and quiet. The tension could be felt in the air. Camilla entered first. She wore a dark green coat, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. Catherine followed, dressed simply in cream, her hands folded tightly in front of her. William stood close beside her. The king sat at the head of the table. He looked tired, older. In his years, the last few days had weighed heavily on him. "I've called you here," he began, "because we need to decide how to move forward. My father's will has brought out feelings that we must face, not for the sake of our own comfort, but for the future of the monarchy." He looked at Camilla first. "You are my wife. You are my queen. That does not change." Camilla nodded slightly, but she said nothing. Then he turned to Catherine. "My father's words were not light. He saw something in you that many of us have also seen. You have served this family with grace. You have never pushed forward, yet you have always been present. For that, I am deeply grateful." Catherine lowered her head. "I only wish to serve the family," she said quietly. "I know," Charles replied. The advisors began to speak next. Some said the will should be kept private. Others believed that the public deserved to know the truth. Prince Philip's final words would carry weight for years to come, especially for those who still wondered what the monarchy stood for. But it was Camilla who finally broke the silence. "I will not stand in the way," she said clearly. "But I will not lie to you. This hurts." Everyone turned toward her. I have spent my life walking behind Charles, not because I was forced, but because I believed it was right. I never asked to be queen. I only wanted to be with the man I loved, and when the public finally began to accept me, I thought, maybe I could give something back. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. But if Prince Philip believed Catherine is the one to carry the traditions forward, then let her carry them. But do not forget that I, too, have carried pain. I have walked through fire to be here." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She rose quietly and walked over to Camilla. She reached out and gently touched her hand. "I will never try to take your place," she said. "I didn't ask for this. I will honor what Prince Philip asked, but only with your blessing." Camilla looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. There were no more words needed. Later that day, the palace released a short statement to the press. It confirmed the discovery of Prince Philip's private will. It praised both Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine for their dignified and respectful leadership in a time of change. It did not reveal all the details, but it made one thing clear. Prince Philip had chosen Catherine to protect certain traditions of the royal family, personal traditions he believed were too sacred to lose. The press called it a quiet revolution. The people had their opinions. Some were confused. Some were inspired. But most were simply watching, waiting to see what would come next. Catherine, meanwhile, stood in the quiet of Prince Philip's old study at Sandringham. The room had been untouched. The bookshelves were full. His writing desk still had his favorite pen. She placed his letter on the desk and whispered, "I will not fail you." The crown had not changed, but something else had. The heart of the monarchy had begun to beat in a new way. Autumn had arrived. The golden leaves fell gently over the grounds of Sandringham. The royal estate, once filled with Prince Philip's presence, now carried a quieter energy. But inside his private study, something had returned, a sense of purpose. Princess Catherine stood near the window, looking out at the garden Prince Philip used to walk in every morning. His study had been untouched for years. Now it belonged to her. But she hadn't changed a thing. The books were still where he left them, his journals still stacked neatly beside the lamp. She came here not as a ruler, not even as a princess, just as someone chosen to remember, to protect, and to carry forward. Each morning, she read a few pages from his journals. His words were full of wisdom, stories, thoughts about the monarchy, and deep love for his family. In those quiet pages, she found strength. She understood that Prince Philip's will was never about power. It was about legacy. He had seen something. In her, he believed she would protect the values he held most dear. The public had started to accept the truth. The news had spread across the world. Some called it shocking. Others called it poetic. Prince Philip, always private and careful, had made a bold final choice, one that would echo through history. Inside the palace, Queen Camilla had returned to her duties. She carried herself with grace, her head high. She no longer spoke about the will, but she also never showed bitterness. She had made peace with it. She understood, more than most, that love for the monarchy sometimes required sacrifice. And though it hurt, she also knew Catherine never meant to take anything from her. In public, the two women appeared side by side at events. Camilla in green or burgundy, Catherine in soft blues or white. There was no rivalry in their eyes, only quiet respect. And that calm between them gave the people hope. One day, King Charles called Catherine to Buckingham Palace. They met in a small room lined with old portraits. He poured tea himself and asked her to sit. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what Father saw in you." Catherine looked down. "He gave me more than I deserved," she said. "No," the king replied. "He saw you clearly, and he believed in what you could do. That means we must believe in it too." He opened a folder and showed her a plan. It was a new royal foundation, one focused on tradition, education, and service. It would be named the Philip Legacy Trust, and Catherine would lead it. The idea brought tears to her eyes. "But why me?" "Because," Charles said softly, "you carry the soul of the family, quiet, steady, and strong. That is what we need now." Months passed. The world watched Catherine with new eyes. She gave speeches, opened schools, met families, and visited homes for veterans just as Prince Philip once did. But she did it her way. Soft words, warm hands, real smiles. People called her the People's Grace. She did not want power. She only wanted to serve with her heart. And because of that, her influence grew without force. Slowly, people stopped asking, "Why her?" and started saying, "Of course it's her." One evening, Catherine returned to Sandringham with her family. William, George, Charlotte, and Louis played outside while she walked alone through the old hallway to Prince Philip's study. She lit the lamp, sat at the desk, and opened his journal to the last entry. It was dated 6 months before his death, the same day as his secret will. "If the world must remember me, let it be through those who carry quiet courage. Let them serve, not for fame, but for duty. And if there is one who understands this, it is Catherine. She may not know it yet, but she is the future. Not in name, but in heart. She closed the book and placed both hands over it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. I know now, she whispered. Across the kingdom, the people felt something had shifted. Not just because of a secret will, or a quiet room in Sandringham, or rare books passed from a prince to a princess, but because something had returned. To the monarchy, something real, something human. Prince Philip's final gift was not just to Catherine. It was to the people. He gave them someone they could trust, someone who didn't fight for the spotlight, but still lit the way. As the sun set over Sandringham, Catherine walked back to the garden where her children were playing. William met her halfway and took her hand. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded. Yes, I'm ready now. For what? He asked. She looked at him gently. For everything. For the future. For what he wanted me to become. William smiled. You already are. And together, under the soft orange sky, they stood as the wind moved through the trees, carrying with it the quiet echo of a man who once stood here too. The echo of Prince Philip and the future he believed in.